Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It's time once again for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit-chat. So, this week, I think it's going to be a shorter video, maybe, or I think maybe the balance is going to be more toward the rambles about life than it is about the books, because I did finish multiple things. I had a great reading week, I think, but several of the things I don't really have to talk about here. So the first is Sharp Teeth by Toby Barlow. This is book 3 of 4 for my Vampires and Werewolves vlog. And so it's done. I have a vlog that I will have talked about it a bunch. You will see that later. This was a reread, so I knew I was going to really enjoy it. This is a book set in contemporary California with werewolves, a dog catcher that falls in love with a lady werewolf, and it's written in verse. So it's very unique and different. So that's book 1. Book 2 that I'm not really going to talk about is When the Sleeper Wakes by H.G. Wells. There was a ton of interest in this book when I talked about it on my Victober TBR. It has taken me a little longer to get to and finish up than I had hoped, but I have indeed gotten to it. And I did really enjoy it. I got so much out of it, and more than I even expected. That's very timely. And also, I think I have a lot to say about it, so I'm going to make a dedicated single book review about this, but I can see so many influences now that this may have had on future literature after it. So the next thing I kind of have to talk about, but it's a horror, so I can't talk about it too terribly much. Sarah Gailey is an author who is now like a solidly favorite author, auto-buy. I've read everything they've written in novels, backlist, and current, and their latest work, Spread Me, just came out in September, perfectly timed for spooky season. However, my hold did not quite come in for spooky season, but I got to it this week. So it was real weird. It was real weird, and yet I trusted Gailey and we went there. So the title, I had assumed that the innuendo of the title was just a little bit of cheekiness, and in fact it's not. Like, the entire premise of the book is very sexual. So if you are not willing to dive into that, this will not work for you. But if you're like me, willing to go there, I think that Gailey was so successful in making this both at the sort of top level, just a enjoyable horror to read, that's kind of like The Thing in the desert. We're following a group of scientists in an isolated outpost in the desert, and they find a specimen and bring it in. And it seems like they maybe shouldn't really have done that, but they do anyway. And so the team lead is trying to navigate things as they're going through sort of the quarantine of dealing with that, things increasingly getting weird, etc. So that's sort of the top level horror aspect. But then there is another layer to this, in that the scientist team lead seems to be like a virophiliac, maybe. She is horny for viruses, and only for viruses. She doesn't seem to have a human sexuality. And so we get that right from the very beginning, like not literally the first scenes or anything, but very early on, before anything starts kicking off with the horror elements. She already sort of is sexually engaging with a photo of bacteria or a virus spreading under a microscope, that sort of thing. And it's really not jarring. It weirdly feels natural. So I love how successful Gailey was at doing that, at delivering that and making it feel like something you can understand what she's doing. Yeah. So I think that this was doing so many interesting things beyond the horror in terms of giving us a sort of shift in perspective to look at things like queer sexuality and compulsory sexuality and how those exist for someone. As well, it also made me think about this as subverting sexualization in the horror genre, because I really hate the way sex is written in horror very, very often. It's often used as kind of a writing hack by horror writers to heighten something or engage you emotionally really, really fast by just suddenly jarring you with graphic sex. And this was not that. This was very integrated into the character, So it felt natural right from the beginning. I also think that Gailey writes stories that are intimate, almost always. And I could feel that intimacy here. Like in Just Like Home, which is another horror, it feels very intimate because you are getting the main character's story of their relationship to home and their relationship with their parents really, really close to the character. And here you're also getting that sort of thing. Like it's a really intimate story of who this person is, deeply. And in many ways, like we're looking at kind of something that's closeted within them, because obviously she hasn't really talked to her coworkers about how she is turned on by viruses. So this was easily the weirdest thing I have read this year. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Leech by Hiron Ennis, which I really loved that book as well. That's another so weird book that I read a couple of years ago or a year ago, and follows a hive mind kind of looking at a parasite and trying to understand it. So it equally has a real weird take. This was so good. So I remain here for anything that Gailey does. I put my faith in Gailey's work, and this turned out to be a 5-star despite nothing about it seeming like it would be a book for me. It was great. It was really, really great. It made me think so much, so much. Anyway, onward to my last book. And again, I feel like I won't have much to say because it's just a very cozy book. So this is Baking Bad by Kim M. Watt. I've known about this one for a while. I think this actually was in the self-published fantasy blog off. Maybe, or I might be confusing that, but I'm pretty sure it was. This is a self-published cozy fantasy mystery. And I would say this leans very much more toward cozy fantasy than it does mystery, though the mystery is throughout. And it's prominently there. Like I kind of kept forgetting that there was a mystery and a murder to be considered. So yeah, so we're in the very small rural British town of Toot Hansel. And it is contemporary times. A ranking member, I think, or maybe the leader of the local chapter of the Women's Institute is out and about, and someone is poisoned, seemingly by baked goods. However, somehow in this small town, there are dragons that are living there, and they quite like scones and tea, and they just kind of are bumbling around. And in fact, they're over there on the back. They're very funny guys. So this is Beaufort and Mortimer. Mortimer are the two dragons. There are more than just them. But for whatever reason, dragons have been around all along, but they're just not visible to people anymore. And for some reason in this town, people have come to connect with them. They've decided to reveal themselves, and they're just kind of kicking around having scones and tea, as I said. So that's a lot of what happens in the book, is them just sitting around having scones and tea and musing about what's going on with this murder investigation and wanting to figure out what's going on and bumbling around. However, the other perspective that we get is a detective inspector who has just moved from London to this small village, and as so happens often in cozy mysteries, discovers that it's going to be a lot more work and effort than she thought. So Detective Adams is finding the people of Toot Hansel to be a bit like herding cats. They keep getting in the way. They don't seem to respect crime scene boundaries at all. And so there was just this funny and charming conflict between them where she's not really mad at them, but she's just kind of befuddled about everything. And she also is aware there's something strange going on that she can't quite put her finger on, which of course is the dragons. So obviously at the start of the story, there's this murder. They're going along trying to figure it out. It's a typical cozy mystery plot. It's very slow and meandering, and it has that really small rural murder mystery vibe. Everything about it is quite predictable, but I was utterly charmed by it, and it was kind of like that perfect bite-sized vibe that I needed. I read this in 2 days while I was reading other stuff. So it was a very easy, breezy read. And I just really loved the little village and all the people in it. So I think this is a continuing series. I know I already did see at the back there are like codes for a cookbook for this and a Christmas book. So I will have to try and get to the Christmas book in appropriate time in the next month or so, if I can. But this was just very charming. Also, weird crossover. So as I mentioned early on, this is featuring very, very prominently the Women's Institute. Like, that is a really major factor here because the leader of the Women's Institute chapter there is a major character, and this baked good tie-in, they're really suspicious, and maybe the Women's Institute has something to do with it, right? I would not have known what that was, except I happened to, since Great British Bake Off stopped, I went and checked if there were any new seasons of the Great British Menu, which is sort of the professional chef version. And there was an old season that just became available to me that wasn't previously. So I started watching that. And the culmination of the Great British Menu is always that they sort of do a banquet honoring some historical group that's prominent within British culture. And by pure chance, I happened to be watching the season where they're honoring the Women's Institute. And this goes on for, it's like 60 episodes, so I'm not anywhere near done, but they're just by drips and drabs over the course, every episode giving you bits of history and context about who the Women's Institute are. So I don't think I'd ever heard of them and happen to be getting this great history about them when they come up in this book. Very wild crossover. I love when that happens. I'm constantly finding that the universe makes those connections, for me. So really weird happenstance, but perfect timing. So those are what I read this week. What I'm reading currently, I think, is mostly what I was reading last week. So I am into Idiot America. I am still reading and nearly done with Love Medicine. Still reading Your Dear Letter. This is letters, so I'm just kind of going through a few letters at a time. And I'm still progressing at House of Leaves. So those are all still moving forward. They're just slowly but surely moving forward. What else? I also know I need to start The Reformatory because it's super long, and that is my book club book for this month. So I'm gonna have to try really hard, and I was able to get a copy from the library, thankfully. It seems everybody wanted that out for October, and so now I need it, and I had to get a large print copy because there were holds on everything else. So those are what I will be focused on this week coming up, I think. In watching stuff this week, I finished one show, and I kind of blazed through it. I watched all of Wayward on Netflix, which is kind of a mix between like cult and children's reform school or teen reform school mix. Weirdly, I saw a docu-series, I think it was called The Program, some time ago, and it was eerie how similar the actual structure of the school was. Like, and it's pretty straight up about child abuse. Like, it's real bad. So do not go into this if you're expecting like it to be in any way up and up. It pretty obviously is from the trailer. Not. There are really eerie things both in the real world stuff, but also sort of paranormally stuff, because it's definitely a horror thriller type show. But Toni Collette is sort of the main character in the reform school, and then there's also this couple who are just moving there. I can't remember who one of them is, but Mae Martin is prominently one of the members of the couple that are just moving back, and doesn't know that his wife has connections back to this community. And they're moving there to raise a baby. They've sort of gotten a deal on a house to stay in, which turns out to, of course, be Toni Collette. So you find that out in the first episode. So all of this converges because Mae Martin is a police officer who becomes involved as things increasingly get strange at the reform school. So I liked the show a ton. I had kind of put it off because I didn't know Mae was involved, who is incredibly great as a writer, but hasn't done anything this speculative and fictional, I think, before. So Mae Martin is a comedian, just put out a music album, previously had the self-inspired TV show Feel Good, and now this is completely, like, really fictional, and I would say it's probably for fans of things like Yellow Jackets. It's a very, very dark, very dark thriller verging into horror. And it was just so well encapsulated, and like, so thought through, start to finish, how the arc of the story was going to go, I think. And so May is the creator and writer of it, as well as starring in it, and did such a fantastic job. Just really, really great. So just one of those creative minds that boggles you. Kind of back to Sarah Gailey stuff. Like, how does your mind go there? So I enjoyed that one very much. So onward to my week. Week was mixed. I guess let's start actually with a Bookish tie-in, and that is the Goodreads Choice Awards. So those have happened, or they have started, and I'm not overly enthused about any of it. I, however, have seen the flood of videos, and it just feels so negative. It feels like this just burst of negativity put out into the universe, and everybody now is rushing to critique it and kind of just crap on stuff that people have really enjoyed. And I think generally consensus is it's not a great award. Like, it's poorly done, and largely that's down to Goodreads just being lazy. One interesting thing actually this year. So in past years, I have been easy to confirm and quick to point out that every year people have books that go in a weird category that does not really fit that book. And every time in the past, it's always been down to the shelvings. So it's people who are readers, not really Goodreads, because Goodreads are lazy. And I think they obscure their metrics on what lets a book go into each category, and how they get selected to be finalists. I think they obscure that just to hide their laziness, really. But their laziness has been whatever it gets shelved as most, for the most part, is where it ends up. And people can shelve things in a genre before they're even out. However, this year, for the first time, I've not been able to actually trace that back. So they've changed something there. Specifically, I noticed there were a couple of things that were associated with like romance, romantasy, that felt a little off. However, there's a prominent one in fantasy, King Sorrow, I think it's the new Joe Hill book. And we've seen sort of the opposite routinely with both Stephen King and Joe Hill, where if they put something out, it goes in horror, regardless of what genre it actually is. So usually we have the flip of this. Here, this went into fantasy. And so I was expecting to go check it and see that, oh yeah, it was actually people shelved it top in fantasy. No, it is most shelved in horror. So I don't know what manipulation they've done this time around, but something is suddenly very different from before. So that's weird and interesting, though it doesn't make me care about the word at all. But to what I was saying at first, just this outpouring of negativity into the world, it was also a week of really bad doom scrolling, I think, for me. So I normally try to make a midweek and a weekend video every week, and I just was not feeling like filming, and so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna not. And the doom scrolling had kind of got me. So although I read a lot, I felt like I was not reading very much because I was just sort of doom scrolling a lot and a lot of wasted time. And that got to me. So I was feeling very low, not necessarily depressed, but just suppressed a bit, where it was hard to feel enthusiastic about anything, and it was getting to my mental health. So I need to get off the doom scrolling treadmill, because that is so easy to get caught up in. I know Melinda also recently talked about this, how just the general everything of the world is penetrating my mental well-being, I think, right now. And that's hard to get away from. There is a lot going on. I want to keep up, and I like everyone else probably am failing, but I'm trying, and also trying to not have it affect me. So I need to back away again a little bit more on keeping up with things, I think, in the wider world, and just focus on my little corner. But it is hard. It's very hard, and I see that going around a lot. And so I am hoping that, especially with holidays coming, like most of us can focus in on that joyful stuff rather than on the negative, like with the Goodreads Awards, where it's just this outpouring of negativity. Let's have some outpouring of thankfulness for Thanksgiving, and of joyfulness for Christmas, and whatever holidays coming up you have to celebrate, like really engage in celebrating. So I'm trying to celebrate the small stuff right now and focus on it. What else went on? I think that weather-wise, we had a roller coaster as well. I think that maybe got to me too, because we went to freezing cold and then jarring back to warm. So it's like upper 70s today. It always feels disjointing when the weather changes so rapidly. And also Ripley, my cat, had some irritation around her mouth. And so she has one known not great tooth. Ever since I got her or found her, that tooth has been questionable, and we keep an eye on it, and nothing ever happens with it. So she was having some dental irritation around her gums. So I set her up for actually her yearly appointment a little bit early to go and do that and do blood work at the beginning of the week. Got her checked out, and yes, we need to at least do a cleaning and check things out, do some x-rays. So end of the week, got her in for her dental. So she is now recovering from her dental. But the tooth that already we knew is not great is still exactly the same and is not bad, but a different tooth was causing the irritation. So she did have to have a tooth extracted, which is always a bummer, but luckily we got it out, so she's not going through any horrible pain. And it looked like it was probably going to get significantly worse, but was just starting to be irritating. So I caught it early, hopefully. So I think that's all for my week, hopefully. Who knows? But I have multiple recommendations for it this week. But I think I'm going to leave you with one from Steve Hofstetter, who's a comedian, actually, and he recently this year spoke to the ALA, and the Library Association, at a conference. And so he's a comedian mainly around the Midwest, but I think he's gotten very, very famous nationally for sort of, he always has a question answer session, it seems like, and interacts with the audience a lot and tackles hecklers quite a bit. And so those clips seem to go viral very much. So you'd probably know him from those. He also gets very political in his comedy. And so this was a discussion or a conference speech where he specifically talked about librarians and book bans and the sort of political message of the importance of libraries and why book bans are so harmful. So I thought it was a great speech and was recently posted. So I just wanted to share that one this week. So with that, I think I'm done with my rambly video that was supposed to be shorter and is really not. So I will leave you there and say I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.